Hello, welcome to Scratch 3D Printing. This video will be the ultimate guide to Anycubic Slicer Next. Let's scratch today's guide. So right now I have the Cobra 3 running, so the quality might not be the best, but I'll make it quick. I'm going to be walking you through Anycubic Slicer Next, all the settings from filament, printers, to print settings, all the tools that Anycubic Slicer Next has to offer, and many more. So hopefully after this video you will have a really good idea of using Anycubic Slicer Next or similar slicers to that, which is based off of orcaslicers. But enough talking, let's just go to it. Okay, so now we are in Anycubic Slicer Next, and if it's your first time opening Anycubic Slicer Next, it will prompt you with the wizard. You just gotta follow through the steps, and the first time that you open this, the printer selection will most likely pop up for you. So just select your 3D printers and then click confirm, and then you are good to go. After that, maybe you are prompted into this page. So if you don't know where to go from this page, we can click here, create a new project, or if you have other projects that you download online, 3MF file, you can click open project and open that project. But for this, we're gonna create a new project right here. So now we are in the prepare tab of Anycubic Slicer Next, and here's your build plate for your specific 3D printer. For me, it's the Cobra 3. So it's this one. So let's go over the left tab here first, and then we'll continue from that point on. So from over here, the first thing that we see is the printers right here. You can open, close this, we're gonna leave it open. And then if you go to the right hand side here, you will see these two sliders. If you click that, the printer selection will pop up. All Anycubic 3D printers will be here. Besides from the Cobra 3 Max, which I believe will come very soon, they even have the Cobra S1, which is nice. I want this. Anycubic, if you need a tester, I am here. So for me, it's going to be the Cobra 3, and on my Cobra 3, I have a 0.4mm nozzle, so I'm going to select that, click confirm. And if you want to change things on your 3D printers, the printing height, the max print X and Y, you can go back up to the printer. And if we look here, Anycubic Cobra 3, so this is the 0.4mm nozzle. And if we go to the right hand side, you will see like a square with a pencil. Click to edit preset. We can click this box here. And now we are in the printer setting. So here you have the basic information, machine G code, print end, extruder, motion ability, notes. For me, I mostly just use the basic information just to add stuff here, just to check. But usually on the printer setting, it's not really something you want to mess around with unless you modify and know exactly what you're doing with your 3D printers. But most of the time, you may want to change this to stainless steel, hardened steel, but brass is totally fine. So for the first information here is the printable space. Printable area, we can click set here, and this will be your X and Y for your 3D printers. So for the Cobra 3, maximum printing is 255 by 255. So we're just gonna leave that at that. Just double check to see if it's correct. But that is there. Texture, we can leave it nothing. Model, we can just leave it. Click OK. Excluded bed area, you don't really want to mess with this unless you know exactly what you're doing, and you have managed the bed and making sure that it doesn't go contact with anything. The next one is the printable height. For the Cobra 3 is 260. Support multi-bed types, you generally don't really need to do that. And for the nozzle volume, this is fine. Like I said, all of this is pretty much default, is good. But one thing that you may want to change is the Z offset. If you want your nozzle to be closer to the bed, you can do a negative number. If your nozzle is way too close to the bed, you want a positive number. So it usually just ranges from 0.1 to 1mm, around that range. Sometimes you do want to set this, but most of the time auto bed leveling is good enough. Machine G code, if you know G codes of 3D printers, you can mess around with this and get exactly what you want. But if you're just starting, just want to print, you don't really have to mess around with this at all. Print end, like I said, don't want to mess with this. Everything is good as default. And extruder, oh, right here, it's important. If you have changed your nozzle's diameter, you want to change this too, because it affects the slicers. And here is the layer height limit for a 0.4mm nozzle. Usually the max can go up to about 0.35, but the default is 0.28, and I find that pretty reasonable. If you want to offset your 3D printers, you can do it here, but 00 is totally fine. Retraction. You can do a retraction test and look at that model, and then you can come back to the retraction, edit the length, edit the z-hop, the z-hop type, the travel angle, the retraction speed, the retraction speed. You can mess with all of this once after you have calibrated your 3D printers with a retraction test print. In my opinion, that's what I would do instead of just going in and putting in random numbers. That is pretty much it with the printer setting. You can look at this and mess around with it. And motion ability, I just leave this default because it's already fast enough for me. The notes, I don't use the notes at all, but if you want to, you can use it. And by the way, if you see here, advanced is turned on, right? So if you turn this off, it will set everything to the most basic setting there is. So if you're just starting out, basic is pretty much what you need. You don't really need more than basic if you're just starting out, but I recommend putting the advanced on so that you can see everything and know exactly what it is going on. The next one is filament right here. So if we look at this filament, usually you don't have 4-layer filament. So if you go to the right here, plus filament, minus filament, and then your Ace Pro, you can synchronize your filament on the Ace Pro onto the slicer if you click this button. But for me, I have my 3D printers off, so it's not gonna work. I'm gonna remove all the filament by pressing the minus. So usually you would just have this, and on your Ace Pro, if you have more materials filament, you can come here and click the add 1 filament, 2, 3, 4. Now we have 4 filament, and in order to change the color, you can click on the box on 1, 2, 3, or 4. Click on that, and now this color will pop up. You can choose any color you want. You can select any color right here. You can just customize to the exact color you want. To change the filament setting, it's next to the number, which is right here. Click this. There's a drop down menu for everything. You can select any settings you want. So the top here is user preset, which is mine. I have changed it. And down here is the system presets. But before we get to that, the filament, if we click the slider here on the filament tab, once again, all the filament will pop up right here, but it's mainly Anycubic filament from ABS all the way to TPU. You can select all of them, or you can just select a couple. You can select how many ever you want. You can create custom filament, but you don't really need to do that. I usually just use the system filament and then just edit the setting. But let's say you have PC or nylon or other PP filament, you do kind of want to customize your filament. So in order to edit the filament, you come to the filament right here, the pencil next to it, you click that. Now we are editing this first filament right here, which is Anycubic PLA mine. This is mine. If you want to save this, you can click this one right. You can click this save button right here, and then it will pop up. You can rename this however you want, and then you just click OK, and then it's renamed. So here we go. The filament. So this is the basic information. The type. What type of filament do you have? PLA, PDG, ABS, anything? You can just select it from here. So once you select your filament type, you can come down to the vendor. I don't really care about the vendor. It doesn't really matter to me. Soluble materials, I don't use it. Support materials, I don't really use it too. Diameter is important. If your filament diameter is not 1.75, you would want to change this. The density is fine like this. And yeah, the shrinkage, just keep it that. Price is just price. Softening temperature, to be honest, this doesn't really matter. As long as it does not have like a heated chamber, it doesn't really matter. So I'm just gonna skip all of that and then come down to the flow ratio and pressure events. In order for you to get this number, you would want to do a flow calibration test before editing this number. And if you want to enable pressure events, you can click this box, and now pressure event is enabled. But like I said, you will want to 3D print pressure events model calibration first before you edit any of these numbers on your specific filament. So let's go down. Chamber temperature for my Cobra 3, it does not have a chamber, so I'm just leave that 0. Print temperature. So here is important. The print temperature for your filament. So if you have PLA, generally PLA about 190 to 220 is good. I usually print at 210 or 220 depend on the filament time and depend on how I just want to print. The nozzle print temperature, you can change this. So for the first layer and for other layers, but for me, I just keep at 210 all the time. Bed temperatures, smooth PI, high temp plate. This is the build plate temperature. So here's the first layer and other layers. So for me, I just put at 60, which is totally fine. Usually you want the build plate temperature a little bit higher on a bed slinger without any enclosure, because it's not going to stay warm consistent like an enclosed 3D printer. So I usually do 60 for PLA and it works fine. And the last one right here is the max volumetric speed. This is really crucial, important. So if you're doing PLA, high speed PLA, usually you can get around 23 to 24, but it also depends on your extruder and your hot end temperature. If you want to increase this and allow more filament to flow per second, you would ideally want to increase your temperature so that it melts faster, so that more filament can come out. But for PLA, fast PLA, 17 to 23 is pretty fine for me. Other than that, you can just change this to what your filament recommends. And usually just PLA 17 to 23 is pretty fast enough. So here's a side note. If you go to speed here and you put your speed at 240, 300, everything at 300, and when you have a model in here, I will load up a model. So I'm just gonna load this model here for the example. So let's say you have the speed up to 200, 200, 200, 200. In this case, I'm just gonna do 300. I will slice the plate and I will show you here. This is crucial. On the right hand side here, you can slide this to see the layer by layer. And then on the bottom here, you can go back and forth and see how your 3D printer is gonna print this model. But if we take a closer look at the bottom right here, we can see that there is a speed X and Y, Z position. And if we look at that, the speed right now is printing this layer, which is the inner wall right here, is printing only at 184 millimeters per second or speed. And sometimes you might wonder, why is it not 300 millimeters per second? I set it to 300. Well, there's many factors that goes into that. One, it would pretty much never reach this number unless you really tweaked all the settings, but usually it will be lower than what you have set here. And what is very important is, like I said, the max volumetric speed. If you keep increasing this to 600, the speed will still just be 184-ish. But if you increase this and you also increase the print speed, then your overall print speed will go up or go down depending on your max volumetric speed. If you put this at 1, it does not matter how high your inner wall, outer wall speed is. And just look at this, it's only 12. Look at that. We set it to 300, but the speed printing is only 12. So like I said, the max volumetric speed is very important. Cooling, for me, I just put all the setting at default, but here is crucial. If you're printing something like PC, like a higher temperature filament, you usually don't want cooling for the first or even 3 to 4 of the first layer at all. You don't want any, so that it will adhere super well to your build plate. So that is what that setting's for. Part cooling fan, your minimum fan speed threshold, and your max fan speed threshold, which is right here. The layer time is also very important. Usually the layer time, you want it to be a little bit higher so that it has time to cool. If you set this to 1, it will print super fast. So for each layer, the maximum time for the fan to cool is 1 second. Usually you don't want that because it's very bad and your print will turn out super bad. Keep fan always on. So PLA, you usually want that, but for other temperature, you don't want this. Slow printing down for better layer cooling. Yeah, this is crucial. So you're gonna slow down your print for more cooling, so that it cools down your filament so that it bonds well with the other layers. And here, don't slow down outer wall. So I made many videos on this. If you want to check it out, it's in my channel. But for this, if you have a tall models, at the bottom, it will print super fast. But when it goes up, it will print slower and slower. But if you check this box here, all of the layers from bottom to top, it will print at a very fast and similar speed. There's no slowdown on any outer walls if you check this. That results in a more consistent color. But if you don't really have support at the bottom and it's wiggling at the top, that is usually kind of bad. That's why, so for that reason, it's gonna slow down when it goes higher and higher for the print. Minimum print speed. So for the minimum of your print speed is right here. Not sure why it's in the cooling part, but it's in the cooling part for the minimum print speed. So it's 20. It will not go lower than 20 unless your maximum volumetric speed is like 1. Then yeah, it will go lower than 20. Force cooling for overhang bridges. And yeah, this is exactly what it says. It will force cooling, so the fan will turn on for overhang and bridges for them to be better. Cooling overhang threshold, it's a speed overhang for the degrees for whatever overhang it is. I don't really use that. Fan speed for overhang is 100%. So this is just the speed forcing it for overhang at 100%. Support interface fan speed, yeah, you don't really need to mess with it. Auxiliary fan, the Cobra 3 does not have it. And exhaust fan, the Cobra 3 does not have it. Setting override. So this is your retraction for your specific filament. In order to edit this, you need to check the box. Say that, yes, I want to edit this. And then you can edit your retraction length for your specific filament. Same thing with the Z-hop type. You need to check this. Say that I want to edit, and then you can edit them. But usually default is pretty good on all of them. You can go ahead and mess around with the retraction. And like I said, print a retraction test. Filament G code is the filament start G code. So it's here. But even if you want to edit it, it's going to be very difficult because you can't get into all the code. You just see this. So don't try to mess with it unless you know exactly what you're doing. Multi-materials change, minimum purge unwipe. So if you're doing multicolor printing, this is really crucial for you. You want to change this number if you want more filament to be extracted from the previous color change so that the color does not bleed and blend together. Tool change. We don't have tool change. I never use this, so I'm not quite sure what all these settings is. But if you hover over it, you will know what it is. But yeah, we don't have tool change, so we're not gonna mess with that. Notes, you just put notes here. Okay, so now we are done with the filament here. So let's go down to the process right here. You have global object and you have objects. So this is what it is. I just loaded 4 models here, which is zip ties. And for global, you are editing all 4 models. So if you change the speed here to 50, all the models will be changed to that. But if you click object, you can select each individual object and edit that object to however you like. But for this, the setting will be minimized to just a couple of few settings like the layer height, the sparse infill, the wall loops, support. If you go to quality, you will have the layer height for each individual of them. The strength you can set like to 100% infill, 0% infill for one model and the other one. The speed, you can select a different speed. For this particular model, I'm going to put this to 200. And if I select a different one, the speed is different. So let's just say that you are printing 2 models at the same time. One PLA, one PTG. Then yeah, you will want to do this. So for this one, it's going to be PLA. So I'm going to do fast. For the second one, PTG, I'm going to print a little bit slower. So the object and global is different like that. So once you edit these, you will come back here and edit this. It's not going to apply to all of them anymore because you have edited one of the object and this is locked in for this particular one. So even if you change the global to a different speed, it will not affect a single object that you have modified by itself. So you want to revert that in order for it to have effect on the global for all of them. So if we come over to the right more, we can see the events button here again. So if you're just starting, you can click basic or turn off events and it will just give you the very basic setting. But for this, I hate it, okay? Trust me, you don't want to use basic setting. I know, advanced setting, there's way too many options, but if you just take the time to read some of this, you will find out that 80% of the setting you don't really use. At least for me, 80% of the settings I don't really use. But if you turn off events, you will see that there's no speed anymore. And let me tell you something. When I first started these kind of slicers here, I used Kira, and I just used the basic information, and I can have the speed. But once I changed to orcaslicers and Anycubic slicers, there's no speed for basic, and I was stuck, confused for like the longest time until I just turn on advanced and just learn each of these by itself, and then the speed comes back out, and then I'm just like, yeah, I'm safe. But yeah, I encourage you to use advanced setting. Even though there's so many informations, I would tell you exactly the ones that I use and the ones that I don't use. But that's just me. You can use any setting you want. So let's go ahead and get started. So for me, the layer height, I use the layer height because that is crucial. If you want a faster print, a non-quality print, you can just increase this to 2.8 or even 0.3. The first layer height, I usually just keep this at 0.2 because that works like the best for me. The line width, if you don't want your line width to be really wide, you can change this, but I found 0.42 on all the prints and all the settings. It's like the best. In the first layer, you kind of want a big width on the first layer, because if you change this to like 0.2, it's gonna be very small, and the next layer that stacks on top of that first layer, it's not gonna have much space to sit on top of, and usually that will result in warping. So for the first layer, I just leave it at default 0.5. Sometimes I change it to 0.42, 0.45, but usually 0.5 is like the best setting for me. Outer wall, inner wall, top surface, sparse infill, I just pretty much keep all these default. And as you can see here, for the line width, I only touch the first layer and default layer. Nothing much, so I only use 2 out of 8 on the line width. Seam position. When I first started 3D printing, I really care about my seam position, but now I just put it to align and then just stagger in the seam, because these slicers just make the seam so much better than what it used to be. So I don't really mess around with the seam anymore unless it's on a really high quality print. Then yes, I will mess with the Z seam. But random, you just see all these blob on the back. It doesn't really put it on the back. Align is like the best options here for me. And the scarf joint seam, you can just put this to contour or contour and hold. These two are pretty much the same setting. But if you want the Z seam, I just put it to contour and hold, and that just pretty much fixes the Z seam. And it will always be there, but it's a little bit better. So Z seam, I just put it to contour and hold, and I just set everything to default. I don't even touch them. I try to mess with them, but the more I mess with it, the worse it gets, and the Z seam is always going to be there, so I just put it to scarf joint seam and leave it at that. Precision. The precision, let me tell you, I don't even use this. So I'm not quite sure what this exactly is, but if you look here, cracks smaller than 2x gap closing radius are being filled during triangle mesh slicing. Yeah, I don't know. For me, I generally don't mess with this at all, and it has been working super well for me. Ironing is for the top layer. So if you want to iron your 3D print, so just imagine your shirt has wrinkle and you are ironing out all those wrinkles. It's just like that, all top surface, and then we're gonna slice the plate. So iron is pretty much just ironing the very, very top layer. After it done its print, right? It will extrude very tiny amount of filament, and then it will just slowly go over your last top layer slowly, and it will just iron it out, making it look smooth, silky, shiny finish. But I don't know, pretty much I don't use ironing because ironing takes a lot of time, and some slicers don't even support ironing. It has the option, but if you turn on ironing and you slice, it will crash because it takes so long, so much time to iron your top layer, and it doesn't really look that good, so I don't use that. But if you want to test it out, you can. Wall generator, just leave it classic. You don't need to change anything. Walls and surface. So for wall and surface, the one that is important is the wall printing order. Inner, outer, or outer, inner, or inner, outer, and inner. So what this is, inner, outer, you're gonna print the inner wall first, and then you're gonna do the outer wall. For me, I have tested these and I found inner outer is a lot better for tolerance and for other types of 3D printing quality. Inner outer is a lot better for me. Inner outer inner, that's just too much work. You're gonna print the inner wall and then go to the outer wall and then come back to the inner. Yeah, for me, inner outer is the best option. Print infill first. I don't really recommend this because if you print the infill first, the layer is gonna expand a little bit, and then if you do the inner outer wall, you're gonna overlap your infill. So I don't really recommend this. I just turn it off. Wall loop direction, just put it on auto. It will just figure itself and it will just work the best. Top surface flow ratio, if you want to, you can change this, but do the calibration first. And then for all of this down here, I don't even mess around with because the default setting is good, so I don't want to fix things that is already good. Small area flow compensation, if you want to turn this on, you can, but it's very complicated. So at the corner of a 3D print, it will slow down and put in less materials so that it looks a lot better, but the result is minimum. You can't really tell, but it is a little bit better. So if you want to, you can turn this on. That is pretty good. Bridging. So all my times of 3D printing, I have not touched bridging. I'm sorry, but I'm just lazy on bridging. If for bridge, I just generate support and just do that, so I don't really need to mess around with the bridging. So I don't know these settings, and like I said, 80% of the setting I don't use. Bridging, overhang, I don't use these two at all. If I want to make a 3D model, I usually would design them with no overhang or minimum overhang, and then use custom built-in support or just generate support on the slicer. So these two, you can go ahead and figure it out yourself. so bridging, overhang, I don't really use, but I did test out the bridge counter bore hole, and this is actually really good. So I don't have a model here, but I think this would be a good point right here. So if we look at the bottom of this and just imagine here that this thing connects over here, right? It's gonna bridge a layer right here, and then it will print a model on top of that layer. If you do sacrifice layer, it will print a sacrifice layer, which is very thin and barely connects to the 3D model, so that you can remove it afterward, and that actually prints really nicely for a counter bore hole. So I just used that filter and it works pretty well. So now we are in strength. Wall loops. So wall loop, I use a ton. So let's just take this box for example. If we look here, the yellow and orange line is the wall loop. So if we increase this to 8, there will be 8 line, and then the infill will be in the middle. Sometimes if I don't want any infill, I just add wall loops to be the infill itself. And if I don't want that, I just leave it at 3. Usually I just leave it at 3 or 4. And if I want a fast print, I just put 2 wall loops, inner outer wall, and that is it. Alternate extra wall, don't need it. Detect thin walls. If you have something that's very thin, you might want to check this box so that the slicer will know that you have thin walls. Top, bottom, shell. This is pretty cool if you want to mess around with it. So if we just slice the plate right now, and we go all the way to the first layer, you can see that it goes diagonally, right? And even for the top layer, if we move this all the way to the top, you'll see that the top layer is also diagonal. But if you change this to something like this, and for the bottom surface pattern to something like this, and then you click slice plate, it will change the bottom and the top dramatically. Look at that. It's now printing like this. Sideways, and it connects in the middle. And with this, you will have a pretty unique top layer. As you can see here, the one that goes up and down, it's a lot darker, and it does reflect on the final product. This is usually darker than when it goes left and right. And if we go all the way to the first layer, look at that, it's printing in a spiral circle. So if you want to have a different first and top layer, these two are really nice. Top shell layer, that's 5. Go all the way here, we can go down 5 layer, 1 2 3 4 5, and that is our top shell layer for our models. 1 2, 3, 4, 5. So there's 5 layers before the top layers. Top shell thickness, I just leave it at 1 millimeter. It works great. Same thing for the bottom shell layer. If we go all the way to the bottom, this is the first layer, second layer, third layer, and then the fourth layer is when it starts doing its infill. Look at that. Then the next is just infill, 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 and it just go from there. Bottom shell thickness, just leave it default. Top bottom solid, just leave it at default 25%. And now we came down to the infill. So this is the red lines right here. This is your infill that is printing extra material, filling the inside of your 3D model. So my favorite is 3D honeycomb. Changed my mind. I love 3D honeycomb because it fills pretty much everything and it stacks on top of each other layer by layer, and it starts right here. It's gonna go all the way over there. If we move up like that, and it starts a new layer over here, so it has like the maximum support for everything. It's putting everything out to equally. Let's just say that. Sometimes if I want everything to be filled, I just put this at 100% density, and all the infill will just automatically be solid infill, purple like that, and boom, we just have a solid 3D print. But if you don't want that, you can increase the wall loop, which pretty much plays the same role. Anchor length, I just leave that at default, and the pattern for the internal solid infill, which is pretty similar to the top and bottom surface pattern, just leave it at default. It works fine. The diagonal works great because it goes from one way diagonal and then it goes to the other diagonal, which is stacking on top of each other, giving you the best strength. Apply gap fill, just top and bottom surface, it's good enough. Filter out tiny gaps. I tried this but doesn't really find any differences, so just leave it at default. And same with this, just leave it at default. Events here is pretty useful. So if you click slice plate again, you can see that the top layer is going diagonally. But if we change the angle here to 90 degrees on the solid infill direction, we can click slice plate again. You can see that it goes up and down now. It's not diagonal. It's really cool how the solid infill direction changed this. Yeah, if you want it to be left and right, you just do that. If you just want it to be default again, you just put that to 45. So I use this if I want my first layer to be cool looking and just one way uniform. I just change that and it's really, really cool. All these things down here, I don't really use them, and you don't really need to mess with them too because it works fine. Now comes the speed. First, layer speed is crucial. On 3D printing, you want your first layer to be your slow layer because if you print too fast, it will not have time to cool down and stick on the plate. And with that, it will result in warping and you will have a really bad print. It's not going to stick well to the bed. So just slow down your first layer. Usually 50 is good for me. So if I print something like ABS or ASA, usually go down to 30 or 40. But if I do PLA, I just do 50, sometimes 60. The 50 is like the sweet spot. Travel speed, just leave it at 100%. Number of slow layer, you can increase this if you want the number of slow layer to be more than one. One is fine for PLA. The other layer speed, like I said, if you turn off events, speed is gone. So you just want that. Just turn on events. Important for other layer speed is outer wall, inner wall. These two, I change them all the time. Usually inner wall, you can print them however fast you want. But the outer wall, you kind of want to slow it down for better tolerance of finish that is closer to what you have originally 3D model. From my experience, if I have a really fast outer wall, it usually results in bad quality. Small parameters, leave at 30%, it's good enough. This, I just leave at 0, it's good enough. Sparse infill, internal infill, you can crank these up to however fast you want that your filament is supporting and your 3D printer is supported to up that speed. Usually I just keep these at the maximum speed. For PLA, any type of PLA works at 300. Top surface, I usually match this with my outer wall because it's the most top layer, which is like the most outer wall layer. So I'll slow down that a bit, it will leave you with a better top layer finish. gap infill, you usually want this to slow down a bit because it's filling the gap and you don't want to print super fast on the gap. Support, it's going to be like one of the lowest speed, because if you print support super fast, it's going to result in poor supports, and you want your supports to be the best it can, so that afterwards you can take off your support from your 3D model super easily. So usually support is my lowest speed. Overhang speed, I just keep all of this at default. It works well. Like I said, if I want to print with overhang, I just use support or design the 3D printed part with no overhangs at all. Travel speed, accelerations, I just leave these at default. It works quite well, and I don't want to mess with these because I have not messed with these and have not tested the capability of the motors. So all of these just default. Oh, and make sure enable Excel to decel is enabled. If you disable this, it will not slow down on anything, and it might result in bad printing. Jerk, the jerk, I don't even mess with it because I cannot wrap my head around what the jerk is. So default is good for me. And extrusion rate, smoothing, yeah, I don't play with this at all. If you want to do experiment with this, go ahead, but for me, I will just leave it at 0. So support for me, I'm gonna tell you right now, I don't use any events at all because the default support on the Cobra 3 and Anycubic Slicer Next is amazing. So I just leave this at default. But if you want to change this, you can do many test print and change however you want to until your heart desire. Setting I use most is this. I just click this all the time, and then change it to manual, tree, or normal manual. I really like manual tree. What manual is if we go back to prepare, we click our model, we click the support, and if we just do this for the support right here, I'm gonna slice that. It's this right here. It's our manual support that we have painted on the 3D model itself. It's not auto-generated. We paint this and now it's there because it's manually doing it. And tree, it works the best. I feel like use the least material and you can break it off pretty easily. The first layer, density, I just leave it at 90%. It works pretty well. On build plate only, remove small overhang. And yeah, all these default setting works well. The ref layer, I don't use ref at all. These days, I don't use ref because I don't like the idea of taking them off at the word. It's so chaotic. Filament for support, yeah, just leave it at default and it will make the ref for you, which is pretty nice. Advanced, yeah, I don't use this, so I'm not going to go over this, but you can mess with this. The only thing that I changed is the top Z distance because that's where it's going to make contact with your model. So we're going to leave it at default 0.25 and slice and see what it looks like. Right there. That is the gap between this greener green and your model. If we change this to 0.05, you can see that it's a lot closer to your 3D models. It doesn't really show, but it is a lot closer. If we change this to 1 millimeters, it would definitely show. Look at that. The distance between your model and this is so huge now. So usually I just mess with top Z distance and it works pretty well. Not everything else is good, but I just mess with this. Tree support, you can change tree support, but I like how it is on default. Multi-materials. If you're doing multicolor printing, you would definitely want to enable the prime tower, which is a sacrificial piece that it's gonna print over here. It's gonna print the new color so that it does not have the previous color, and then it will come and print your 3D models. So you can increase the prime volume, you can increase the width, the brim, however you want. All of this is on multi-materials. So I just enable and disable and the default works fine. Others, for others, I don't use a skirt anymore. I used to use a skirt. What a skirt is, so let's just do it. Let's just do 2 skirts for the loop and we will see what that is. It's just a skirt for the 3D model. You just print these 2 lines on the outer of the model and then it will start to print the 3D model itself. And look at this, it's gonna print that first and then it will start printing the model itself. When I first started, I used the skirt a lot, like 100% on my print. Recently, I don't use the skirt at all because it's just a waste of time, materials, and stuff like that. Pretty much just leave this at 0. The brim, I still use the brim on higher temperature filament or like a model that has minimum contact to the bed, I usually just use the outer brim only. So it will be on auto. I just change it to outer brim, and then the brim width I just put like 5. It will add 5 brim at the outer of the 3D models so that it holds down the 3D models a lot better. But like I said, you still have to clean this, but it's a lot better than the wrap. The brim object gap is this, the gap between the brim and your actual 3D printed parts. So it's this tiny gap here. If you want the gap to be bigger, you just increase the number. Special mode. So slicing mode, you can do regular, even, odd, close hole. I tried these, but it doesn't work, so I don't use that. The one I use is print sequence, layer by layer. So layer by layer is printing all of the models layer by layer. Okay, so I just load in 6 screw here. Layer by layer, it's printing all of the screw layer by layer at the same time. But if we change to object, you will see that time-lapse is not supported by object. Okay, whatever, yes. You will see that it added these huge circle. And you also see that it added this box on top here. That is the limit for the object, because it's going to print one object and then it's going to go to the next object and print that object. But this is very complicated because you can't slice it. It's too big. The amount of space that needed is way too big. So usually you can just do like 1 or 2 of this. But if I remember correctly, there is an option for you to change the amount of space needed for one object like this. But I don't know. Usually when you change this, it has more setting, but for this it doesn't. Yeah, the print by object is complicated and I really don't use it. So there we go, we got 2 objects there, and if we check this like that, it's gonna do 1, finish it, and then start a new one over here. But it still takes a similar amount of time, and for me it does not really benefit anything. I just use layer by layer. And then for time-lapse, tradition, fuzzy skin, we can do all walls for this fuzzy skin just to test out. And if we look at our model right now, it has these fuzzy on the outside, which is bad for screws. So if you have any other things, yeah, fuzzy is good, but for screws, it doesn't work. That is just fuzzy skin. And if we increase the thickness to 1, it's gonna really increase the thickness, look at that, of the fuzzy skin, and it will just make your 3D printer really fuzzy. Yeah, the G-code output, leave those at default. I don't mess with them at all. And yeah, there you go. All the settings on Anycubic Slicer Next. The ones that I use, the ones that I don't use, all of them. Hopefully I go over them pretty well, because the ones that I don't use, I'm not sure what they are, so I don't want to give you false information. But if you just hover over them, it will tell you exactly what it does. And you can just change them, do a print, and then just redo that over and over again. But hopefully this will give you a pretty good idea of what all these things is and what are the most important ones to use, so that it will really benefit your 3D printing. And those that don't really matter, you don't really need to use them. And now if you want to save, you can click the save current process here, save this, add a name, and then save it. If you want to remove a preset, you can just click this minus right here and it will remove it for you. If you are looking for options that you can't find, you can just search it here. So we're just gonna do it as speed, and everything with SPE is gonna show up, and you can just select whichever you want. So now that we have went over the settings over here, the next one is gonna be these tools at the top here. For the first one here, you just add files and drop it into your slicer. This one is add a plate. So let's say you have 2 objects that you want to print that is big, fills up everything. So this plate is for PLA, this plate is for PTG. You want to divide them, just do it all in 2 plate here, and then you can just 3D print this plate first, and then you can print this plate. So these screws are loading like this, and the next one is auto orient. So I'm gonna select all the screw. On Windows is Control A to select everything, and then click this auto oriented, and boom, look at that, it will auto orient to the best position that it think it is. Sometimes it doesn't do well, but most of the time it does pretty well. You will select all of them again, and the next option is arrange all object. So on short key, your keyboard, you can just click A and it will automatically arrange everything in the center of this build plate, and it's very easy. Or you can click this, do your spacing, let's just do 20 spacing and arrange, and it will move out. So once you have set this, you can just pretty much press A all the time and it will work. So for the next option here, split to object. So that is just if you have these two models grouped together. So we can right click, assemble, and both of them, if we look at the left here, they are in assemble right here. They are grouped together. You move one, you move all, and we can click this split to object to split both of them again. And I believe the split to part is that if you load a model that has many parts that is stuck together, you can click this and it will separate all the parts and put it into the plate. I have not used this button at all, so I don't know how to activate this, but essentially that is what it does. And this is variable layer height. It just change the layer height of your 3D model. But every single time I change this, it just gives me error. So I don't know, man. Maybe I'm just using this wrong, but usually you want to edit this on a curved surface to make it look a lot better. The next setting, the next tool is move, which is M on your keyboard. You can move your model or any place you want, or you can just click and drag. The next one is rotate. You can rotate left, right, up, down, any way you want, or you can just auto orient it and everything will be perfect. Next one is scale. You want to make this bigger, smaller, however you want, X, Y, Z. Look at that. The next option is lay on face. So you press this and you press this and it will show you all the faces where your 3D model will be able to lay down. So for example, on this one, it's a screwdriver. So we click this, we click the lay on face. You can see that these white things pop up and you can click and now it's gonna lay on that face. Same thing, you click here, it's gonna land on that face. So that is quite useful sometimes. Now we have this cut. You can cut however you want with this. So let's say your model is super big, so you want to cut in the middle, and then you can print those two parts and then glue them afterward. You can do that. Now both of them are apart. They are printing in different parts. Match Boolean, I don't use this at all, so I don't know how to activate this. But then the next one is support painting. You can paint your own support right here. The tool circle, the sphere, which is similar to the circle, the fill, which is my favorite, and or the gap fill. I don't use it, so my favorite is the fill. And the setting I use is on overhangs only, and I changed highlight overhang to usually 45 or 50. 45 you can still print, so I just put it to 50 and just fill this. Even if you click on the model, it's not gonna work because you click on overhangs only. So it will work on the overhang only, which is super nice. You can view the section, but I don't really see the beneficial of this, so I don't use it at all. And then if we take a look, and now it will generate the support where we have painted. The next one is scene painting. Like I said, I usually was pretty big on scene, but now I don't really care where it pops up anymore. It still looks good. You can do this and the ZC will follow line right here, but it's still not perfect. Or if you want to be perfect, you can click vertical here and then just click this. Even if you go offside, it will just go perfectly up and down. And then it comes to multicolor printing. So maybe this multicolor printing bucket is not showing for you, because if we remove all the filament, the bucket is gone. In order to get the bucket, you need to add at least 2 filament so that the bucket will show. And now we can select a model, click the color painting. We can select filament 1, 2, 3, or 4. We can paint it purple, blue, however you want, white. Sphere, same thing. Triangle, it's just gonna print all the triangles. The layer height range, this is quite useful because let's say you want the bottom here to be that, right? It's gonna do fast and easy. And then you're like, okay, and then you're like, okay, I want this to be that. It will print everything like that. It's so nice. If we do the circle painting, it's not gonna cover everything unless you move up and down. the layer height range is pretty good. You just do this and it will cover everything. But my favorite is the height range and the fill. If you leave this at 30 or just increase this, it's gonna fill everything to your desire like that. And you can just click and drag and it will paint everything. If you increase the smart fill angle, it will fill at a 90-degree angle and it will just, you know, fill everything. But if you have a color, it's not gonna fill in. Edge detection. The gap fill, you just increase this and look at this gap, it's gone. It will just automatically fill in the gaps, which is pretty nice. Now we click slice plate. Our models right here, the screw that we have painted will be multicolor. And over here is our purge tower. It will do the purge. Then we'll come back and print. As you can see here, our support, there's so much color on there too. Then the next is text, emboss text. If you have a 3D model and you want to emboss some text in it, you can do that. But I don't have a model now, so it's just out there. You can double click, edit, you can put anything you want on here like that. You can select your font, you can select the height, the depth, but yeah, you can go and mess with this. The measurements, the measurement here, you can measure this from that angle to that angle is 90 degree. This angle, yeah, you can do all of that. A symbol view, you can even view your models if you want to, but I don't use this at all. And there we go, all the tools, quick preview guide over them. So for this, the most important tool that I use 99% of the time is auto oriented, the auto arrange, and I just manually move them or just press A and everything will be in place. I use support painting and color painting if I want to do multicolor printing. For emboss, you can do that, but I usually do that on the 3D modeling software that I use. So now we can come to the preview. So over here on the top right here is our keys. So we can change from filament type to line type, speed, layer height, layer width, flow, all of this, temperature even. So usually it will go to line type if you only have one color. But once you have multicolor, it's gonna change to filament. So you can see exactly what filament you're using, the amount. And if we go down here, it's gonna say that it's gonna change 102 times on this print. The total time for this is gonna be 2 hours and 48 minutes. And look at this, flush time is gonna be 2 hours, 14 minutes. That is so much, man. The actual model printing is only 30 minutes, but it's changing color for 2 hours. Woohoo! And if we click line type, there's a slider at the right here. We can move this up and down. There's a plus here. You can click this. You can right click this, add a pause, custom G-code, jump to layers, or whatever you want to do. But that usually does not really work, so I don't really depend on that. But I just like to move this up and down, view my 3D model, how it's going to be printed. You can even move it from the bottom up so that you only see like a floating layer of it, which is so nice. In the bottom here, you can move this back and forth. You can see the nozzle moving in real time when it's printing. That is so cool. And if we look closer down here, you see that there's the XYZ position and the speed of the nozzle printing, the movement speed. Look at that. It's very, very useful. And right here is your G code telling you all the position, what it's doing, stop printing, object screw number 2. And then it's going to do layer change. The Z height is 5.6, and then the height of the layer is 0.2. It's going to do this layer change, and then it will start the wipe, and then will continue printing, which is really useful if you are into G codes. And yeah, that's pretty much it with all of this. The workbench. The workbench, there's not much on the workbench for Anycubic Slicer Next. The printing task will show up here. Your print setting will show up here. It will tell you the bed nozzle temperature, the fan speed, headlight, cam light, and your 3D printer itself here. And it will tell you your Ace Pro, your external rack, which is one single filament. And if you have an Ace Pro, it will show you 4 filament right here. You can feed on feed, and you can turn on the filament dryer through here too. You can home your 3D printer, automatically manually move them up and down, left and right. And this is your camera right here. You can see it in action. We don't see a bed mesh, which is so dumb in my opinion. I wish they will show us the bed mesh so that we can just see our bed mesh. I just love a bed mesh. You can do land printing, but land printing kind of sucks, so just do cloud printing. It's the best. And now for the last piece in bit of this for calibrations. So now we're gonna do a calibration temperature test. You can select any types of film you want. Start temp and temp, we click OK. Transfer this, we're just gonna click discard. And now it's going to load in everything, all the G codes that we needed, all the start temperature and temperature. It will automatically do that, so we don't need to do anything. We can just click start print and it will print, and it will just do 90, 150, and it will just keep changing the temperature. Same thing with flow rate. Do a pass 1. Let's not save. Let's not transfer anything. It will automatically add all the things that we needed to this calibration, and we can just click start print. So that's how you calibrate your 3D printers to the best ability that it can. Hopefully that answers most of the questions that people have on starting a new slicer or getting to 3D printing with Anycubic Slicer Next or any other slicers. Hopefully that's a really good overview of the slicer on everything that you must know on the 3D slicers. Let me know in the comments down below if I missed anything. I will try to answer the best if I can. Well, that's a lot of information, so hopefully you give this a like. Wow, that is a lot of information in my opinion, and I hope you learned something from that. And I hope now that you will have a good idea of using Anycubic Slicer Next or any slicers that is similar to that, which is based off of Orca slicers. But if you still have any questions, leave it in the comments down below. I will try my best to answer them. Leave a like on this video. It took so long to make this video and edit everything, but I'm willing to do it for all of you guys out there. Thank you so much for watching my videos. Subscribe to the channel because more amazing stuff like this is coming. And as always, keep on 3D printing.